Better communication means better connection. So, just a bit about myself after that lovely intro. I am just gonna just do a quick roundup about myself. So, I have a bachelor's degree in mass communication, which I think is quite perfect to be able to have that with while talking about communication. 12 years under my belt in the journalism industry, which includes social media strategy, and I've worked under the titles like Independent, BuzzFeed, Metro, Evening Standard. Um, as a for a living, I speak. So as mentioned before, I have my own podcast, the Yellow Card Podcast, which I've interviewed celebrities and other other public figures as well, and also most recently the Discover Me podcast, which was just mentioned. I would definitely implore that that's listened to. Adjoa Ando, as many of you may or may not know, is a woman of faith, and we definitely did a deep dive in how we kind of communicate our faith in public forums. So, at the core of my mission lies a commitment to crafting compelling narratives that resonate with diverse audiences. So, I also do that through photography, which is a hobby of mine. And I take photos at my local church, Flowing Rivers. And up until recently, for 3 years, I was a trustee at Christians in Media, which was a pleasure and a delight to sit on that board. And a fun fact about me, I've been married for nearly 2 years. My anniversary is coming up soon. And I love to tell people that I live in Essex as a former Londoner. I think it's a characteristic quirk for former Londoners to announce that they've left London. So better communication, I'll dig right in about better communication. First and foremost, especially as believers, it's a reflection of Christ. So good communication is 100% a lifeblood of any thriving community. And when I do speak about community in this talk, I am also talking about relationships, whether it's ministries, family life, or at work. So in the Bible, which is, our cornerstone, Proverbs 18:21 reminds us that the tongue has the power of life and death. So with this, such a strong, I would say, responsibility in how we use our words. This powerful truth is definitely something that reminds us that how we speak can either build or burn bridges. And it's not just how we speak, and we'll go into the words we say and things like that in a second. But today, I definitely want us to explore how better communication can lead to better connection and ensure that we are a reflection of Christ, reflecting the love and the unity that he displayed and he demonstrated to us in the word while he was on earth during his ministry. So, like I said, this can be applied in whatever we do. Even if you are having a chat with, your local cashier at Tesco, it is really important as Christians that we really think about how we are communicating and is our communication a reflection of Christ? So, what is communication? For the sake of time, I'm going to give you like a few seconds to really think about what is communication. I think we all assume we know, but are we all on the same page? So, in regards to the few seconds, your time is up. So, communication is a process of exchanging either information, your ideas, your feelings, or your thoughts. And it's a perfect time for me to remind us that doing so sometimes isn't just private. So, for example, maybe your friend has posted a picture on Instagram and you've decided to leave a comment. She responds, you respond, and you've just had an innocent exchange, cute word exchange that probably makes sense to the two of you. And you understand each other's tonations, you understand each other's quirks. But that communication has actually been done in front of a group, in front of thousands of people, depending on how far the reach of that Instagram post goes. So communication isn't just done between individuals, it is also done between individuals and or groups. And sometimes more than others, we aren't aware that our individual communication or what we perceive to be our individual communication has actually been done in groups. So where you believed you've exchanged information, ideas, and feelings between maybe just you and someone else, there were other witnesses, whether virtually or whether in a crowded space. So communication is often done through speech, writing, which I've just covered, gestures, facial expressions like body language, and nonverbal cues. And this is one that we tend to forget. When people talk about communication, they maybe think about the communication devices, like their telephones or their verbal voices and how they maybe have a conversation with someone. But as I'm doing even in this talk, body language and gestures say so much more than we actually realize. Why is communication needed? It's needed to understand each other. We were put on this earth to be together. We need to understand each other, which is why I guess when we t- when we hear the story or the punishment that the people in Genesis faced after building the Tower of Babel, what was stripped from them? Their ability to communicate with each other. So it is needed for understanding, collaboration, and building relationships, which strengthens communities. The benefits of better connection. So again, a few seconds to really think about what are the benefits of connection, of benefits of a better connection, which comes from better communication. So spoiler alert, I did hint to some of the benefits earlier on, but we'll take a deep dive in right here. So emotional support. It provides support during difficult times. So, for example, it doesn't have to be something tragic, but just even through a minor challenge, you're able to actually get through that, especially in a community. And it gives you a sense of belonging. When we look at, I'm going back to the book of Genesis, when we look at Adam being all alone as the only humankind on earth, God looked at the situation and he said, it's not actually good for poor Adam to be alone. And then once Eve came along, there was instructions for them to be fruitful and multiply. What did that create? Community and belonging. So Adam now looked at Eve and was like, yo, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And he felt a belonging with Eve where he maybe didn't do that when he was looking at Mufasa, the lion. Connection also brings forward collaboration. Strong relationships lead to better outcomes. This could happen in ministry, as I mentioned. It's a perfect tool to have at work. And for me, I found that it's actually just such a beautiful thing to have inside your home, inside your family, inside your relationships, inside your marriage, for example. To be able to have better communication strengthens that relationship and a stronger collaboration. And it also leads to personal growth. We think about young children, toddlers who are learning to communicate. You can see their development and how they develop a lot quicker once they're able to communicate and once they see that they're being understood and they actually develop new skills. I mentioned toddlers, and sometimes we kind of feel like, oh yeah, developing new skills is something that's reserved to maybe someone who's under 3 years old. But we are always, and we should be, developing our skills up until we're old pensioners. So the impact of better communication. Just a reminder, Jesus modeled the perfect communication. He was patient, he was kind, and he always sought to understand others. Perfect examples is when he shared parables, for example. He ensured that the parables that he shared made sense for the crowd that he was sharing it to. Even in his inner circle with the disciples, there were times he couldn't point blank say to them, you know what? During that Passover time in about 3 years, I'm going to die on a cross. But he shared these parables with them in a way, he communicated in a way that was patient. He was very patient when I do look at the word with the disciples. He shared the message with people in a kind way. He didn't, hold back on the truth. He definitely communicated the truth at all times. But he ensured that the way he communicated with people was kind, and it was patient. And he said what the Lord commanded him to say. So he didn't shy back from being able to share what he needed to share at the times when he needed to share it. And we saw that Jesus also went back to his quiet place a lot to find out what's next and how to communicate, which is something that we should all do when we are communicating. And we'll go into that in a second. So effective communication can deepen a relationship and resolve a misunderstanding in your life. And ironically, as I was preparing for this talk, I actually had to deal with that this very morning, where I had to communicate with a friend an area in which offense could have brewed and caused, I would say, maybe unnecessary strife and maybe honestly burnt a bridge in a very good friendship, in a very good relationship. So I had to communicate to this friend that, you know what, this and this didn't kind of land in the way that you wanted it to, and this is how I took it. And we were able to effectively communicate, and it's like nothing had happened. And in fact, it resolved a misunderstanding that just needed to be discussed through effective, kind communication, and that used some of the pointers that I'm going to share. Before I do, I want to remind us and just everyone to take a look at the picture here on the screen to imagine each conversation as a brick in a foundation of a strong community. So every conversation needs to be a solid brick. If one brick is a little bit jaded, a little bit, not strong enough, it does harm the foundation of a community or a relationship or a household. So the stronger and more positive our communication, the more robust our community becomes. And like I said, think of your community as your workplace, your home, your ministry, any place in which you are effectively communicating with someone who is not yourself. So, how to improve communication and why it matters. Listening actively, which is something I'm sure we are all doing right now as you're listening to me. So James 1:19 says, "My brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Like I mentioned this morning, of the situation this morning, I did have to slow down in the situation that I had demonstrated that actually happened to me this morning. So, a practical tip for this is practice active listening by giving the person you're communicating with your full attention. So, this includes nodding and summarizing what they've said to ensure you understand and never assume you've understood, which is perfect because at the end of this talk there will be a Q&A. So if you feel like, you know what, I should communicate and ask some questions and summarize what's been said to ensure understanding, there's a great opportunity for that in the Q&A. How to improve communication and why it matters. Point number 2, using non-verbal communication. So our body language, our facial expressions, and our tone of voice can communicate as much and arguably, if not more, than our words. Tone can absolutely change how what you are delivering is received. You can go from saying, what would you like me to do about that, to what would you like me to do about that? Very different sentences there. Practical tip when it comes to non-verbal communication is maintaining eye contact, using open body language, and being mindful of the tone, as I've said, to ensure that we're conveying warmth and openness. I wish there was video recordings of Jesus speaking because I am so sure he would have gotten the use of non-verbal communication absolutely on lock. And point number 3, speaking with kindness and clarity. It's possible to deliver unwanted words. Sometimes Jesus's words were unwanted with kindness. And admitting the truth is not kindness, is actually a sin. And rather, it's niceness. So it's important for us to be kind and not just nice. A clear way to maybe remember this is that kindness is a fruit of the spirit, but niceness is not. Niceness is quite selfish. Niceness we do for ourselves, like it makes us feel good. Kindness is for the other party. So Colossians 4:6 says, "Let your conversations be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." And we can actually really do this with sitting back, like Jesus did, going, sitting in our quiet time, renewing our daily bread to ensure that the conversations we have during the day are a reflection of Christ. Like I mentioned at the top of this talk, it's super important that all of our communication is a reflection of Christ. Practical tip, before speaking, consider whether your words are truthful, necessary, and kind, not just nice. And finally, why does this matter? Well, spreading the gospel. At the heart of everything that we do, we're instructed to spread the gospel. Like I said, this can be done with just a clear and compassionate communication with your neighbor as you pass them on the street. So, clear and compassionate communication makes us effective witnesses of the gospel, drawing others to the hope we have in Christ. I mean, if you are snappy and your communication isn't warm or compassionate, would that person want to know the Christ that you claim is in you? So, in conclusion, better communication leads to better connection, not just with each other, but with God as well. As we strive to listen actively, to speak kindly, and actually embody Christ in us, in our interactions, and in everything we strengthen our communities and glorify God as well. Like I said, better communication is a reflection of Christ. So it's really important for us to commit to becoming more like Jesus in our communication and creating connections that reflect his love and unity, which in turn, excuse me, which in turn strengthen our communities as well, strengthen our relationships as well. And like I said, the ultimate goal is to be witnesses of Christ and spread the gospel in everything that we do. And communication is such a fundamental part of being able to contribute to your communities.